Please sit quietly. I would like to acknowledge college captains Blake Atkins, Jade Erglis, Lena McCoy and Ryan Sal, who will lead this Anzac Day commemoration, the 23rd in Varsity's history, marking 108 years since the landing at Gallipoli. Furthermore, this year on the 18th of August, we mark the 50th anniversary since Australia's involvement in the Vietnam War.
Good afternoon and welcome special guests, students, parents and Varsity College staff. Firstly, a reminder not to applaud at any point during the ceremony and to ask you please to turn your mobile phones to silent. The 25th of April is a very important day on which Australians and New Zealanders honour the service and sacrifice of our Defence Force personnel. These courageous men and women have served in armed conflict, vital ancillary roles and peacekeeping missions since the day in 1915 on which our Anzacs landed in Gallipoli. Today we join together to commemorate their service to our country.
At Varsity College, we pay respect to the elders past, present and future. We acknowledge the traditional custodians, the Kumameri people of the land on which we live, work and play. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, as we thank them in allowing us to come together to learn and share our knowledge. We are very privileged to have Warrant Officer Class 2, Matthew Julian, joining us today. Warrant Officer Class 2, Matthew Julian, is a current serving member of the Australian Army and is currently posted to the Land Warfare Centre, Canungra. Enlisting into the Army in 1997, at 17 years of age, he has served on operations in East Timor, Solomon Islands, Iraq, and Egypt, and fulfilled mentor roles with the US military and Papua New Guinea Defence Force. He is a member of the Varsity Lakes community and is here today to speak with Varsity College in commemoration of Anzac Day.
Varsity College, faculty, staff, students and distinguished guests. Thank you for your invite today. It is both a privilege and honour to come down and provide a moment of reflection, which most Australians recognise as one of the most important days in our history. Anzac, a set of initials etched into our history, representing the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. In 1915, those men, together with British, Indian and French soldiers, were sent to fight in Turkey on the Gallipoli Peninsula. Well, what happened very early in that morning, when it was still dark, 36 long ships or long rowboats loaded with Australian and New Zealand soldiers and towed by naval boats left the protection of the British ships and set off for the beaches of Gallipoli. They were about to invade Turkey. An hour and a half later, the first boats crunched against the rock and sand of a place now known as Anzac Cove. The soldiers scrambled ashore and started to climb up the steep slopes as enemy machine gun and artillery fire screamed down upon them. Many were killed and wounded in those first few hours ashore. In the dark, many of the boats had drifted off course and had landed quite a long way from where they should have been. They had, in fact, landed where the Turkish forces were at their strongest and where machine gun and artillery fire were at its thickest. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, some 12,000 men had landed. Later that day, some very brave Australians reached the heights overlooking the beaches. However, they soon forced to turn back, never to return. Within a month, over half of those who had landed at Gallipoli were either dead or wounded. For 7 long months, the Anzacs hung onto their position on the cliffs and slopes of Anzac Cove. The Australians and New Zealanders could not go forward, but neither could the stubborn Turkish forces force them back into the sea. In those months, a spirit developed amongst the soldiers, a spirit which relied on each soldier helping out his mates. By the end of that year, some 32,000 Australians and New Zealanders had been killed. The battle had been a military failure. The Anzacs had lost and they were forced to withdraw and leave Turkey. The battle was over. But in those months, when so many Anzacs had died under terrible conditions of heat, cold, sickness, suffering, lack of sleep and food and shelter, in these months, the Anzac legend was born. The term Anzac is now known not only amongst military personnel, but civilians across the world. The actions and conduct of those Australians and New Zealanders who endured a dangerous and ultimately perilous task in the face of adversity and hardship has left a page in history and an unremarkable legacy. Their actions have forged what has now become known as the Anzac spirit. This Anzac spirit is admired by Allied forces, both respected and feared by adversaries, and welcomed by displaced persons whom have been ravaged by the effects and conflicts of disaster. Our military history, albeit short in terms, is not only written on the pages of warlike operations, but also that of peacekeeping missions, and includes the service of Australian men and women in World War I, II, Korea, Malaysia, Borneo, Vietnam, Somalia, Rwanda, South Sudan, East Timor, Solomon Islands, Egypt, Iraq and Afghanistan. It is also present within our humanitarian operations our service people undertake across the globe, and within our own communities, providing aid and support to those affected by natural disasters. The Anzac spirit continues to empower and resonate today with the serving personnel of the Australian Defence Force. In meeting everyday challenges, ADF personnel embrace this Anzac spirit. It is part of us, part of our uniform, and part of everyone that has served before us. But what does Anzac spirit mean, and what should it mean to you? I believe it is not just a word, it represents a number of qualities and virtues which all of us, not just when men and women of the ADF, but within all Australians and our everyday lives. The Anzac spirit represents a sense of purpose and direction that is not about oneself, but about people, who we are, and our belief in the greater good. As young Australians, you can apply this to your everyday life. That can be at school, at home, or amongst your mates. The physical and moral courage to continue to do better regardless of the difficulties that lay before you. This Anzac spirit is today also represented by distinct behaviours and values in today's ADF personnel of service, courage, respect, integrity and teamwork, excellence. In my 26 years of service, I've served on 7 operational deployments and several international engagements, of which I personally reflect upon. I've witnessed the atrocities that conflict has left on a country and its people, but I've witnessed through small acts of kindness the expressions of turmoil replaced with relief and happiness with the presence of Australian soldiers. It is in these moments I reflect upon, and I'm proud to have served and continue to serve Australia and those in need. I hope that as young Australians, that some of what I've said today resonates within you, that a small understanding of our significant military history makes you proud to be Australian. As we gather before the rise of the sun tomorrow, you'll see current and ex-serving personnel stand together within our communities to mark the commemoration of the Anzac, acknowledging all those men and women that have served and continue to serve. I welcome and encourage you to pay your respects because such a great burden has been placed upon these men and women, and for which some have paid the ultimate sacrifice and are no longer with us today. Their memories to be carried on by sons, daughters, grandchildren, and you as young Australians, lest we forget.
We would now like to thank the organisations and people who have joined us today for Varsity College's 2023 Anzac Day commemoration. First and foremost, we thank our veterans, serving officers, ancillary personnel, and the organisations that support them and their families. Mr. Tony Shaper, School Liaison Officer for the Mudgebar Rabina RSL. Mr. Peter Franklin, Gold Coast Legacy. Miss Alicia Iriani. Mr. Aaron Martin, and Ms. Michelle Peroni, lest we forget.
We would also like to thank our elected civic officials, Mr. Ray Stevens, MP, Member for Mermaid Beach, and Councillor Herman Vorster, Division 11. We also thank representatives of the Varsity College governance community, President of the Varsity College PNC, Mr. Colin Frew, Vice President of the Varsity College PNC, Mrs. Marion Frew, and Mr. Nick Rohn, Varsity College School Council representative. We extend our appreciation to members of the wider Varsity College community.
Our special thanks goes to Mr. David Greenhalgh, the bagpiper, and Year 8 student Jihu Huang, our bugler. We acknowledge the performers, tech crew, staff, and students of Varsity College who have worked so hard to make this ceremony happen. And finally, we welcome the parents, students, staff, and wider community of Varsity College and all Defence Force veterans and current service personnel who are with us today.
I will soon ask you to stand for the national anthems of New Zealand and Australia, which will be performed by our symphony orchestra and members of our choir, conducted by Miss Griffith. Please now stand quietly for the national anthems.
Standard is
Please be seated. Today, we recognise the courage of the Defence Force and ancillary personnel, past and present. They offer us their service and too often give their lives or health to uphold the values we hold most dear. At Varsity, we embrace the value of courage, not in the challenging circumstances of war, but in the challenges of our everyday lives. We look to those who have been called upon to exercise physical bravery, spiritual strength, and moral fortitude to guide us in our own difficult choices.
Today, we especially remember all veterans and serving personnel and extend our gratitude to them, recognising the commitment they have made to the lives of others, including our own. Today is a time to reflect on what has gone before and to commit ourselves as individuals and nations to building a better Australia and a more peaceful world.
Anzac Day, 25th of April, is one of Australia's most important national occasions. It marks the anniversary of the first major military action fought by Australia and New Zealand forces during the First World War. This moment of nationhood reminds us that in any war, no matter how noble the cause, everyone suffers: the combatants, their families, innocent victims. On this day, we especially offer our gratitude to those who, since World War I, have served in further conflicts around the globe. In World War II, the Korean War, the Malayan Emergency, the Vietnam War, in Iraq, and in Afghanistan, Australia's longest-running campaign.
In addition, we offer our support and gratitude to those who have served in peacekeeping and humanitarian missions, from Rwanda to Cambodia, Haiti to Mozambique, Fiji, Timor-Leste, Somalia, and many other nations. We remember their families, their friends, and the victims of conflict whose rights they have defended. All those who have served, those who have suffered, and those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. We will remember them.
Students, please listen carefully to the next instructions for the next 5 minutes. The most important part of our ceremony. Piper, flag party, and bugler, please step forward. First, guests will be invited to lay wreaths. Once the guests have assembled, the lament will be played on the bagpipes. The lament is a song of mourning and remembrance, and so we bow our heads in respect at this time and throughout the commemoration. Once all wreaths have been laid and the guests are in place, the bugler will sound the last post. This call is traditionally used to signal the day's end to troops and to bid farewell to the dead.
At the end of the last post, there will be a 1-minute silence, honouring those who have given their lives so that we may live ours. This will be broken by the rouse. This bugle call is named after the French word meaning to wake up. It symbolises the rebirth of the dead soldier into eternal life. After this, the Ode of Remembrance will be recited. Please remember to repeat the line, "We will remember them," at the end of the ode.
The wreath party will be led on behalf of the college by Miss Michelle Perrone. Miss Perrone, who has served in the Defence Forces, will distribute the wreaths, then with Mr. Martin and Miss Iriani, lay the final wreath on behalf of Varsity College. Staff, students, guests, please now stand silently. As the bagpiper begins the lament, guests, please lay your wreaths following the school captains.
is
As we move into the second century since the conflict in Gallipoli, it is timely to remember that this, the 21st century, in the lifetime of almost everyone in this hall, Australians and New Zealanders have been engaged in military conflict around the world. They have seen service as military combatants, trainers and peacekeepers, and have offered humanitarian assistance in times of environmental and political catastrophe. This is vital but challenging work. In supporting vulnerable people around the world, many Australians and New Zealanders have lost their lives. Many have suffered lasting harm.
Ode of Remembrance. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget. Flag party, take your seats. Please now all sit quietly.
We applaud the efforts of all the organisations who work so hard to support returned service personnel and their families. And we are especially grateful for the work of the organisations who are represented here today. We also extend our heartfelt thanks to the families of those who serve in the Defence Forces. Theirs is often a silent suffering, and it is hard to say goodbye to those you love, especially when you are uncertain whether they will return to you. We recognise also the pain and suffering of the innocent victims of war, many of them children younger than us. We will remember them.
On behalf of the students and staff at Varsity College, we now offer this resolution. This school reaffirms its gratitude for the service and sacrifice of all Australian and New Zealander sailors, soldiers, Air Force personnel, and medical and civilian staff. On the first Anzac Day, and in all other conflicts since, these men and women have given the enduring gift of liberty of thought and action to us all. They have, on our behalf, also supported millions of people around the world fighting for their freedom or suffering in conflicts or catastrophes that are not of their own making. These men and women come from all walks of life, all races and all religions, and are united in a common cause, a cause for which we have the utmost respect.
This school voices its heartfelt sympathy for the relatives of those who have given their lives, their health, and their youth to uphold the fundamental values of integrity, courage, and compassion for others, values shared by the Varsity College community. This school gives its assurance that those who have fallen, those who have survived the perils of war, and those who are currently in conflict zones will be remembered and honoured, not just on this day, but in the way we live our daily lives, upholding the values for which they have made so many sacrifices.
We dedicate ourselves to the cause of justice, understanding, and peace, and strive for the wisdom and strength to build a better tomorrow.
To conclude our commemoration, we now invite Mrs. Sharon Schultz, Varsity College Executive Principal, to deliver an address on behalf of the college community.
Good afternoon. Distinguished guests, members of our community, staff and students of Varsity College. Thank you for being with us this afternoon to commemorate Anzac Day for 2023. Today, we respectfully and solemnly remember the landing of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps at Anzac Cove in Gallipoli on the 25th of April 1915. And in doing so, we recognise the courage and sacrifice of those that served in this military campaign. But most importantly, as a college community, we take the time to remember those that lost their lives. We are respectful of and thankful for their ultimate sacrifice. The tradition of Anzac has long been held as one of the most important to our society and continues to have great impact on our lives today. And I'm sure we will all see that tomorrow in attendance at Anzac ceremonies across our nation. We do all have a responsibility to maintain our commitment to honouring the Anzac spirit, as it is a spirit that has come to symbolise not only the great courage and sacrifice of the soldiers at Gallipoli, but also the courage and sacrifice of all those who have served our country and who continue to serve and help those countries and communities that are unable to help themselves. The legacy of the Anzac flows into the deepest parts of who we are as a nation. It perpetuates a belief that happiness, freedom and safety are the rights of all people in our country. Anzac Day reminds us of the importance of loyalty, courage and mateship. As a country that celebrates not only these important qualities but also a great multicultural diversity, it is important that we all understand that without the sacrifices made by these men and women, that many of the things that we take for granted and love about our lives today would just not be possible. So today, we stand humbly, reverently and respectfully as we acknowledge those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. To those men, women and their families, we say thank you, and we will never forget, lest we forget.
Thank you, Mrs. Schultz. We now invite our Year 12 school leaders to form the Guard of Honour. We call Mr. David Greedhalge and the Flag Party to assemble, ready to lead our guests from this commemoration. Students and staff, please remain seated during the departure of our special guests.